Hey guys, Ashley Bratzel here. I am here to tell you about my newest design, Purpureus Grandiflorus. It's quite the mouthful. You can give it a nickname, you can call it whatever you want. I've sort of been calling it Perp Grand or Perp G, which always makes me think of like a felon, a bad guy, you know, perp. Anyway, you might be wondering why I have so many blankets scattered about behind me. I have a lot of random things to tell you about this pattern. I'm going to start with showing it to you. You can see these little flowers. It's kind of an upside down flower, and then he goes up the other way. It's kind of, it has like, for me in my mind when I was drawing it, I was thinking of Beauty and the Beast with the flower under the glass. And then I changed it into thinking about springtime and the crocuses. So Purpureus Grandiflorus is actually just the Latin name for crocus. My blanket. I have testers that have tested the other options. So one of the things you'll notice with this design is that there are a lot of options. So this is the one I did. It's center out. You can tell because of the way the colors have changed around the middle. And it is the mosaic version, the overlay mosaic. There is no dots. The solid parts are just actually solid. And for this one, I didn't quite make it to 3 squares by 3 squares. That's how I've measured the yardage and the sizing. Is I've said, you know, if you do the design, you can have a single square, and then you don't cut it. You don't make squares that are joined together. You just keep going around and around, and you can get a bigger blanket. So I did about 2.5 for my one. And the reason I ended at that strange number is because I used 1 ball of We Love Yarn Mega Ball Hobby. It's not sponsored, like I just bought it because it was on sale. And I used 2 of these little Horizon ones. Technically I used a little bit from this ball as well. I had bought 3 and I planned to put all 3 together into there, but I just didn't. I stole just a little bit from the 3rd ball to finish off my round, just to make it look nice. I figured I'm allowed to cheat like that, but one of the things I love about the center out repeatable option that goes forever, you can stop whenever you want. You do not have to finish to row whatever. Just finish a row and you're done. You can always add a border if you don't like the way mine is. Just the edges are just the edge, right? You can add a border if you want, but it's not necessary. There's no tails, there's no cut ends. That is what the bottom up overlay mosaic version does. And I don't have that sample because I didn't make it, my testers did. But this is a sample where you're cutting and you get at the ends all this fringe. And some people don't mind the fringe and some people absolutely hate it. So you can add an envelope border. Now this one is my double wedding rings, which is very similar to Purpureus Grandiflorus in that it has 4 options. Interlocking, interlocking center out, mosaic, mosaic center out. So it's the same idea. It was 1 square and I wrote it so you could just repeat it forever and ever and ever. And whether you're doing it side by side, again, you can repeat it forever and ever and ever. You can go as tall as you want, as wide as you want. It doesn't matter which technique you're using. You can go forever and ever and ever. And that's kind of why I like it. However, it's also kind of why I don't like it. Am I allowed to say that? See these? These works in progress that are never ever getting finished because I could just make them bigger. If I'll just put it on the shelf and I'll work on it later. I mean, they're big enough, but I could just make them bigger, so I'll just leave them there. I'm not going to cut the yarn yet. I could just make them bigger. So these are my double wedding rings center out samples. I had done double wedding rings back and forth, and I did a couple repeats and I felt like it was done. And then when I did the center out versions, I never decided that it was done. I just kept going. It goes to infinity, so maybe I should go to infinity, right? So I think that that's a problem with these designs that go to infinity, is that if you're not telling me how to stop, I won't stop. I don't know, maybe you're not like me, but that is, you know, something to be aware of, that if you want to have something set in stone that says you must do this many rounds, then this maybe isn't the pattern for you. This one is a design that I had just a little while ago, where it's worked from the center out or bottom up, both techniques of course, but it has a final row. You have to go through the whole thing and you finish it and then it's done. So I definitely finished that one. Those ones over there, not quite finished. If you do the interlocking or the mosaic, bottom up or center out, you can be done whenever you want to do it, of course. So I just made a single square. And can you tell, is this interlocking crochet, you can see because there's 2 layers of mesh, has this one been done from the bottom up or the center out? You can't really tell because my yarn hasn't changed colors, and because with interlocking crochet we don't have cut ends on the sides telling us that it was done from the side, you know, bottom up. So I don't know for sure if the interlocking center out version is as useful. So that's why for like my Celtic knots, I didn't make a center out version of the interlocking, because the design basically looks the same and the technique is slightly more complicated and a lot more work for me on the pattern end. So I'm not sure the rewards are worth it. But we're not talking about everything all at once today. Today we're talking about Purpureus Grandiflorus. Another thing to note, because it is repeatable to infinity, you can use any weight yarn. So this again, it's not Purpureus, a different one, Garden Mandala. And I used fingering weight yarn for this one. And this was another one where you go until it's finished, and then it's finished. And it's kind of small. You can kind of see, because it's fingering weight yarn. So when you use worsted weight yarn, obviously it's bigger. If you use fingering weight yarn, because I know especially European countries, you guys really prefer, what do you guys call it? 8/4? 4-ply? I think you guys often call it 4-ply. Yarn is so confusing, right? You've got how much it weighs to get your yardage and your ounces, and you've got how many yards and meters, and then you've got the yarn weight, which is like fingering weight or lightweight or DK and worsted weight, and then in different countries you call it all sorts of different things. It's a very confusing topic. So if you're confused, please don't feel bad. It's normal. The point I'm trying to say is for this one here, because it goes to infinity, if you're using a fingering weight yarn, you can make it as big as you want. It doesn't run out and be small like Garden Mandala was. If you're using a larger weight yarn, it'll be done sooner. That's basically how it works. Of course, your yarn will cost different amounts and blah, blah, blah. There is also the option of you can make, this isn't the right one. This is double wedding rings. Double wedding rings, it's a single square. It's the same as this. Purpureus Grandiflorus, single square. You could also just make a single square, and then you could have like a pillow, or you could join the squares together, different colors, that sort of thing. This is hobby stencil. So there's just a lot of options. Squares, repeatable squares, different techniques. And I know that you guys can sometimes feel overwhelmed and confused. And instead of offering good value, I'm just offering confusion. So I wanted to go over a few more things. I did not print off all the papers that you get. If you're printing patterns, I advise maybe just print the things that you need. So it comes with 4 options, 4 files really. Interlocking, interlocking center out, overlay mosaic, and overlay mosaic center out. You technically have a 5th option because I have my Tunisian mosaic crochet tutorial. It tells you if you use the overlay mosaic pattern, this is how you can do the Tunisian stitches. So that's an option too, but it's not another file. And each file is large. So there are 4 files and each of them are big. If you're printing all of that out, you basically have a book. I basically wrote a book. It just doesn't look like a book. Anyway, I wanted to go over some of the details. So this page is page 2 of the interlocking crochet bottom up. And you could try to cheat me, I guess, if you want to see. This is basically a mini version of the chart. And the inner white and gray part is repeatable. And then the locking edges are not repeatable. That way, no matter how many repeats you stick in there, you still have the locking edges. I don't really like it when my interlocking crochet on the edges is too flappy and gappy. Maybe you don't care. There's also these words here. They're actually important. When I make a pattern and I type up all these words, I really want you to read them because they tell you so much good things. So this one is telling you how to determine your foundation. That's like one of the most confusing parts of interlocking crochet. Not only like doing the foundation, but now you have to calculate your own repeat numbers. That can be overwhelming. Ask for help. It's okay. I will do some math for you. You want to do 2 repeats? I'll tell you the numbers. Easy peasy. If you want to figure it out yourself, I tell you how, okay? The Facebook group is also a great place. You could tell them, you know, it says using your main color, start with a base of 42 windows and add 38 windows per repeat. Well, I want to do 3 repeats wide. What do I do? Someone will tell you. They can help you, okay? The only thing is you're not really supposed to show screenshots of the pattern. So I'm cheating right now because it's my pattern. I'm allowed to do that. Technically, no one else is allowed to do. To adjust the height, you just repeat. I didn't print off the written. That's okay. You repeat from rows 5 through 80. So basically, you're repeating this whole section, you know, however many times inside and then however many times up. And it can be confusing for sure, so ask for help, it's fine. I did put an example here. If you want a blanket 3 squares wide, begin with 118 main color windows, which sometimes people don't want to do the windows like square, square, square. They would prefer chaining. So chain 239 main color chains. The accent color, you can't really do the windows thing, you pretty much only chain. You need a chain of 237. For 4 squares wide, see, I'm trying to do some math for you. It's here. 156 main color windows, or 315 main color chains, plus 313 chains in the accent color for your foundation rows. And that is this part here on the next page where it says how to do that foundation setup. So you get the key, also important to read. You get the key, then it tells you do this many repeats, plus you always have to have that plus, okay? So this one says 43 stitches in the main color plus 38 per repeat. And by stitches, if you're reading the key, a double crochet stitch is obviously 1, and then a chain is 1. But when you read my key and you have the written, which I don't have, it goes by front and back. And a front stitch includes 1 chain and 1 double crochet all together. So it's really this stitch count I've here is counting those bars, the double crochets. Those chain spaces are just nothing in the stitch count. So you've got your end stitch and your front stitch, and then all the bars in between. They all count. Now, that was what I wanted to show you with these papers. This one here also, to determine how much yardage you'll need for yarn. That's why I have like such a long information thing. It's not usually this long. This one tells you if you wanted to make the single square, you know, like this. This one is interlocking center out, and I can tell because the border line just ends. There's only 1 line on the border. If you were doing the back and forth bottom up interlocking crochet, you would get these double lines on all the edges with the top corners and the bottom corners going across like this, because that's how I lock them in. So I can tell which technique you've done, or I've done, whoever's done. If you're doing, you know, the single square, you need this much yardage, but each repeat doesn't include those extra border lines, so it's slightly smaller, and that's why you have to start with this and then you add this much per repeat. And the other thing to notice, when you're doing the bottom up, it's easy to think, okay, I'm going to do 3 wide. All right, and I go and I go and go, and then I got 3, you know, I've got 3 wide and it's 1 square. I'm just going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. That's fine. Now you can think 3, 6, 9. When you're doing the center out, this is the square. Kind of goes like this. And as soon as you start working past 1 square, if you're doing the center out, whether it's interlocking or mosaic, you're now working on 8 additional squares all at once, because you have the square above and the square below and square to the side, square to the sky, and then all 4 corners have another square. So once you've done 1 square, the next round is actually 8 more squares. That's a lot, right? Which is why you don't have to finish all of them. If you go further, the next one, because that would be a 3 by 3, 9 squares then. The next one will actually have 5 by 5. You'll have 25 squares. So maybe there's a, you know, if you want to do more than 9, you might not want to get to 25. You're allowed to stop anytime. So, okay, let's keep going through my papers. There is timestamps if you don't like this. So the next thing I wanted to show you was this page that is talking about the interlocking center out. And there's only 1 little blurb about per square. And it doesn't say the first square is this much and each subsequent square is less. And that's because of those locking border lines. When I did the center out version, I didn't include them. So each square that you do is just the same. There is no extra math involved. And of course, if you're changing your yarn weight and your hook size, or if you're not meeting gauge, which on a blanket, really, who needs to? You might get different yardage, but this is a good estimate. And if you know how to figure out your own gauge swatch, then maybe that'll help you too. So repeat through infinity, blah, 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 blah. The chart that comes with the bottom up interlocking crochet, it's like that little mini square I was showing you. Colored edges, inside is repeatable. The center out one is a triangle because you're doing each side 4 times. And once you do 1 square, that's this bottom blue triangle. You just repeat this 4 times and you've got 1 square in the middle. Then to do the next row, you are repeating this square. This is what a single square looks like. And you have these corners. And then if you want to make it bigger, so this would be 1 square, this would be 9 squares. If you want to make it bigger, you repeat the corner, and then you repeat the square twice, and then you finish with the other corner for every side, okay? And that's how the center out charts work for interlocking and for mosaic. You might have seen a tutorial, an old one, where I had an interlocking chart, center out, and it was like purplish, red, and green, and it was big, really long, and it was too confusing, so I've adjusted things a bit. Then we have Mosaic Crochet, Purpureus Grandiflorus. So just like the interlocking one, when you want to say, okay, I want it 3 squares wide, what's my foundation width? That math is here for you. I've given you some examples, I've given you some numbers, and I've given you 2 options for the yardage, because again, there's those stitches that kind of, you know, joining stitch and then end stitch. And then this one has the balancing stitch as well. Has the 2 lines at the bottom that don't get repeated 100 times. And the 2 stitches at the beginning and 1 stitch at the end. It's your balancing stitch and your end stitches. So that amount of yardage adds up if you're doing repeats. So I've said that if you're doing a single square and you have your end stitch and your joining stitch, it's 275 yards of the main color. And we'll go over colors in just a second. If you're adding a repeat and you're not doing all of those additional things, you're going to save 15 yards per repeat, which can add up if you're doing 25 squares, right? So I tried to be really accurate in how much yardage you'll need. Here's my center out one. I used my own photo, right? And again, I was talking about the sizing. My gauge is written for a worsted weight yarn with a 5mm hook. My sample, I used a DK weight yarn with a 5mm hook. So I've told you how much yardage I use for this, but I've also written down how much yardage I normally would use with worsted weight yarn. It's all math. I don't actually have to crochet that blanket to tell you how much. Let's talk about colors. It's sometimes confusing, regardless of whether you're using interlocking crochet or mosaic crochet, which one's the main color and which one's that accent color or contrasting color. I use the term contrasting color in my mosaic patterns and accent color in the interlocking. No reason really, except for that's just how I had written them up and it's stuck. It feels weird to change it now. The point is, when I'm drawing, most times, but not all times, most times main color is what I'm drawing with. So whatever design I'm drawing up, I put a border line and then I draw something. That's what happened here. So the lines that are drawn are main color, MC. And background color, in this one, you can tell, okay, this is the main color, it's got a flower, background color is purple, right? Some designs don't have really a clear, well, which one counts as the background in that, right? I tried to keep it the same on all 4 options so that main color means the flowers. This window, well, I don't know if it counts as a window. It's supposed to be the glass on top of the flower with the flower inside. The drawing part is main color. Black on here, and on this one it's the colorful stuff. The white is my contrasting color. So that's important because you want to make sure you know what color you're using, otherwise your blanket could come out kind of inversed. And on some patterns, matters more than others. This one's pretty forgiving, so if you make a mistake and you don't want to pull it out, you're probably still going to have something beautiful. My testers' photos, they've used both. Dark color as the main color, dark color as the background color. They both look great, so win-win. The wrong side is often something people ask about. The wrong side isn't necessarily wrong, it's just not the right side where the design is shown. And I wanted to keep it distinct from saying front and back, because interlocking crochet, that's the stitches. You're working on front of your project or you're working behind your project. Whatever side is facing you, it doesn't matter if it's the right side or the wrong side, it's just whatever's facing you. Seems confusing, but if you actually read the definitions, it's to clarify. Overlay mosaic crochet on the back, you can almost see, or maybe you can kind of see the flower. It's kind of like an illusion there. Anyways, it'll be stripes, dark color, light color. Mine starts at the center out, so I have boxes, but it's kind of stripy boxes. On the interlocking one, the wrong side, you can see how black is the lines, purple is the background. The wrong side flips it. Purple is now the lines, but they're not exactly like they were on the other side. So you can see there our flower, he doesn't have a stem anymore. There's no spikes here because each stitch is opposite, not just an inverse, right? So it still makes a cool design. I still like it, but it is the wrong side. And that's what you need to know about Purpureus Grandiflorus. And you can laugh at the name and you can ask all sorts of questions here, Facebook group, whatever. I just hope that this video is going to help you make a good choice, because I don't want to take your money if it's not something you love. Hopefully the options are not going to be too overwhelming or confusing. Ask for help if you need it. I'm here. My group, like some of these people in my group have been crocheting longer than I've been alive. Lots of information and expertise there, okay? We will work together and we will make something beautiful.